In this tutorial, we'll be making a cowboy hat incense holder and a matching cowboy boot matchstick holder. Let's get started by cutting the clay in half and placing one half back in the bag to save for another project. Next, we're going to roll out what's called a slab of clay. For this step, you'll need a rolling pin and either 2 rulers or 2 scrap pieces of wood of equal thickness, so that we can make sure that our clay is the same thickness all over when it's rolled out. Sometimes when rolling out clay, it can form little cracks from the clay being stretched out. This is totally normal and can be easily fixed by using a very small amount of water on the sponge that's included in your kit, and then just using your fingers to massage the water into the clay to rehydrate it. You can continue then to roll out your clay until it's completely flat and in line with your 2 scrap bits of wood or your rulers, whichever one you used. Next, you'll need to cut out the templates that are included in your kit and place them onto the slab of clay, except for part C. We'll be using that template later for the cowboy hat. Right now, we're going to focus on the cowboy boot, so cut around each of the templates using the wooden knife tool included in your kit, and then put the excess clay back into the bag to keep it from drying out. Then, using a sponge with a small amount of water, or just using your fingers, smooth out any rough edges on each of the pieces you cut out. Smoothing out rough edges will just make joining the pieces together a little easier. You should now have all of these pieces cut out. We're going to focus on making the base of the cowboy boot first, so you'll start by joining part E and part F together. Now grab your wooden needle tool from your kit, and we're going to do something called scoring our clay. This is done by drawing some lines in a sort of crosshatch pattern. Score your clay on all of part F and just half of part E, like so. Then use a small amount of water on your finger and massage it into the lines you just made on part E. This will kind of act like a glue for your clay to stick together. Now press part E and F together with the lines facing towards each other. You should now have something that looks a bit more like this. As this is the base of the cowboy boot, let's give it a bit of a high heel. Place your piece on a flat surface and press down on the pointier side. You should now have something that looks a bit more like this. Now we're going to make the leg of the boot. You'll need to score the sides and bottom of part A and part B, like so, leaving out the top part. Once you've scored your pieces, they should look a bit like this. Before you add any water to attach them together though, you'll need to give both pieces a bit of a curve. You can do this by wrapping the pieces around your wooden needle tool, like so, and gently pushing the clay around it. As you can see here, sometimes clay cracks when it's being stretched out, so if this happens to yours, just make sure to add some water and massage it into the clay with your finger to rehydrate those areas. Your part A and part B should now look like this, and we are going to attach these pieces together along these sides. But first we'll need to add a bit of water along these sides to act as our glue. We will be adding the water here and here. Because it's a bit of a narrow area, you can use your paintbrush that's included in your kit to add the water. Make sure to massage the water into the lines that you've created. Then gently press the sides together. You'll now need a small amount of clay to roll out into what's called a coil. A coil is just a pottery term, which basically means a sausage made out of clay. Use the leg of the boot as a guide to measure how much of the coil you'll need, and then cut it with the knife tool and then attach it to the seam of the boot and press down firmly. Next, you will need to blend the coil into the leg of the boot on both sides using the opposite end of the knife tool. Start by pushing down the coil with the knife tool and then blend downwards to flatten all of the blending marks you've just made, like so. If needed, you can also add a very small amount of water to smooth out any stubborn blend marks. You'll need to repeat these steps on the other seam of the leg and then also blend the inside of the boot as well. Now that we have the base and the leg of the boot made, let's attach them together. There will be a little gap after attaching them, but don't worry, I'll show you how to fix that later. First, score along the base of the boot, where the leg will meet the base, and then you'll need to add some water into the lines. You can use your finger or a paintbrush like so. Then, make sure that the points at the top of the leg are facing to the sides when you attach the pieces together, like so. Then just like before, you'll need to use the opposite end of the knife tool to blend your clay, or if you find it easier, you can also use your fingers to blend, whichever you prefer. Next, grab some more clay and make a small coil. This will help fill in that gap I mentioned earlier. Place the coil on top of the gap and blend half of it up towards the leg of the boot, and then the other half down towards the base, and it might be easier to do that part on a flat surface. Now you can add part D on top like so. Pinch the front of the boot to give it that classic cowboy boot look, and then blend the rest of it into the boot with your finger, or if you prefer using your knife tool. Then, using your needle tool, you can draw a line to show where the heel of the boot starts. Now let's add some small details. Start by rolling out some clay into a long and thin coil. Again, just like before, when stretching out clay, it can sometimes crack, so if this happens with your coil, just rehydrate it with a bit of water, and then continue to roll out the coil until it's at a thickness that you are happy with. Then place the coil onto the front of the boot and wrap it around in a sort of squiggly pattern like this. You can add some water to the edges using the paintbrush so that when we go to blend it, it'll be a little easier. Using your knife side of the knife tool, you can blend into smaller areas and then use the opposite end for the rest of the squiggle. Blend half of your squiggle down towards the base of the boot and then the other half up towards the leg. Then use your paintbrush with a bit of water to smooth out those blend marks. Now roll out a small thin coil again, and this time cut it in half so it's easier to work with and save the other half for later. Press down so you flatten the coil, and then we'll attach it to the top part of the boot. You'll need to do this on both sides. Make sure to take off any excess and tuck in the rest inside. Now grab your paintbrush and add a little bit of water all along the edges, and then using your knife tool, blend the coil to the inside of the boot. Then grab your paintbrush just to smooth out any of those blending marks. And that's your cowboy boot completed. Leave it to dry for 2 to 3 days before painting. Now let's get started on the cowboy hat. Roll out a slab of clay, using the leftover clay we had from earlier, and grab template C. Cut around the template, and then smooth out any of the rough cut marks. Next, roll out a small ball of clay and tap it against your work surface to flatten one side. Then grab your wooden needle tool and press it into the non-flat side. Then start shaping your ball of clay into more of a triangular shape like so. Then using your index finger, create dents on 2 sides of your triangle. Then grab your needle tool and make some score lines on the flat part of your clay. Then push them into part C. This will give you a bit of a guide as to where to draw the next score lines. Then add some water into your score lines and attach both pieces together. Then roll out another long thin coil and place where both parts of the clay meet, taking off any excess. Then blend half of the coil down and half of the coil up. Then use your finger to smooth out any of your blend marks. Next, use the thinner end of your needle tool. We are going to make the hole where the incense stick is going to stand, so make sure you angle your needle tool instead of going straight down. Next, lift up both sides of your hat using your finger as a support. This will give your hat that classic cowboy hat look. Then you're done. Leave to dry with your cowboy boot for 2 to 3 days. Once your pieces are dry, they will be much lighter in colour, just like this, and you may notice some rough edges or even some slight cracks in your clay, so let's smooth those out using your sponge included in your kit with a little bit of water, and this will help even out your surface ready for painting. To make our colours nice and vibrant, we need to add a white base coat. Start by painting just half of each of your creations, so that when you set your pieces down to dry, the paint won't stick to the surface that you've put them on and peel away from your creations. Add 2 layers of the white base coat paint, and make sure you leave about 10 to 20 minutes between each layer before going on to the next. Now it's time to add colours, starting with the blue paint. Paint half of the cowboy hat and half of the cowboy boot. You'll need to add 2 layers of each of the colours to make sure they're nice and vibrant. Our next colour will be pink. We're going to focus the pink on the underside of the cowboy hat and on the bottom half of the cowboy boot, making sure to do just half of the cowboy boot so that we can set it down to dry in between layers. Then add a second coat of the pink paint and our other half of our boot. Now we're going to use purple for all of the detailing. So we're going to paint the edges of our hat, then the squiggle of our boot, the pull straps of the boot, and then finally the heel. Next, we're going to paint some scalloped detailing on both of the hat and the boot, starting with a line going all the way around the crown of the hat. Then painting some half circles going all the way around the hat and making sure to take your time. It's quite detailed work, so you don't want to rush this part. Then we're going to do something very similar on the boot by painting all along the top before moving on to our half circles all around the edge. Just like with the hat, take your time with this part because it is quite detailed work. Once dried, add a second layer so your colour is nice and vibrant and opaque. The last colour we'll be using is yellow, and using the tip of the detailed brush, we're going to draw a small diamond-shaped star. You can do this as well on the cowboy boot, or you can just draw 3 small crosses. Make sure to do it on both sides. Using the pink paint again, we're going to paint some hearts all over our hat and boot. You can do this pretty easily by just making a small little V shape using the tip of the paintbrush again to get that fine detailing. Once your paint is fully dried, it's time to add the gloss varnish. This will both protect your piece and also give it a really nice shine. While applying your gloss, try to brush it so that it's as smooth and as even as you can to make sure that you're left with a really nice finish. And now we're pretty much done. All that's left to do is add some incense and some matchsticks. Take one of the incense sticks and pop it into the hole in the hat. And before adding your matches to the boot, you can choose to cut the striker strip and glue it to the bottom of the boot. That way you don't have to keep the matchbox. A quick fire safety reminder, make sure you use the incense and matches in a well-ventilated area away from any flammable objects, and make sure not to leave them unattended. Make sure you fully extinguish both when you're done using them before putting them in the bin. I hope you enjoyed making these fun clay pieces with me.